Africa's highest political institution, stands tall in Addis Ababa, known to its indigenous Oromo people as Finfinne. Here, the African Union represents the aspirations of 55 nations: unity, sovereignty, development, and peace. But beneath the diplomatic architecture of summit halls and continental declarations lies a deeper and more complex story. How did Ethiopia's victory at Adwa shape Pan-African identity? What does sovereignty mean inside a multi-ethnic federal state? And how does Oromo heritage intersect with Africa's continental vision? This documentary explores the institutional evolution of the AU from the Organization of African Unity to Agenda 2063 alongside the indigenous, democratic philosophy of the Gadaa System, a centuries-old model of rotational leadership and accountability. We examine the life of General Tadesse Birru, a patriot who trained Nelson Mandela in guerrilla strategy, linking Oromo resistance to the broader African liberation struggle. We revisit the poetic conscience of Laureate Tsegaye Gebre-Medhin, whose words, later adopted as the AU Anthem, called on Africa to unite in dignity and justice. And we reflect on the symbolism of the AU flag, designed by Oromo artist Yadessa Bojia, a green continent illuminated by white rays and encircled by golden stars, representing hope, unity, and a shared future. This is not only a story of continental unity, it is also a story of identity, federalism, indigeneity, and unresolved constitutional questions. This is sovereignty, identity, and the Pan-African architecture. The African continent's modern geopolitical landscape is anchored by the African Union, AU, an institution embodying the aspirations of 55 members for integration, peace, and prosperity. The AU's permanent headquarters in Addis Ababa, historically Finfinne to its indigenous Oromo inhabitants, symbolizes Africa's enduring defiance against European imperialism. Ethiopia's ability to preserve its independence during the late 19th century scramble for Africa established both the prestige and philosophical basis for its role as the continent's diplomatic hub. Yet this narrative of sovereignty is complicated by internal dynamics, particularly regarding the state of Oromia, which geographically surrounds the capital and its Gadaa system, an ancient and sophisticated indigenous democratic model. The contributions of Oromo figures such as General Tadesse Birru, literary laureate Tsegaye Gebre-Medhin, and artist Yadessa Bojia highlight a multifaceted history in which local indigenous governance and individual resistance intersect with the broader Pan-African project. The AU represents the culmination of a century of Pan-African thought, evolving from a focus on decolonization to a modern agenda emphasizing socio-economic integration, human rights, and democratic governance. Officially launched in July 2002 in Durban, South Africa, the AU succeeded the Organization of African Unity, OAU, which had served as the continent's primary intergovernmental body since 1963. The transition addressed the need for a more effective framework to meet 21 century challenges. Addis Ababa's selection as headquarters followed the May 1963 OAU summit, where 32 heads of independent African states signed the OAU Charter. This decision emerged from negotiations between the Casablanca Group, advocating immediate union, and the Monrovia Group, favoring gradual cooperation. Emperor Haile Selassie I, leveraging Ethiopia's non-colonized status, mediated the compromise, cementing the capital's role as a symbol of African independence. The AU operates through multiple organs that ensure policy coordination and continental governance. The Assembly of Heads of State and Government sets overall policies and elects the African Union Commission, AUC, chairperson, while the Executive Council, composed of foreign ministers, coordinates policies and prepares assembly sessions. The AUC, as the AU's secretariat, manages day-to-day operations across sectors including agriculture, infrastructure, health, and peace fund management. Other organs such as the Peace and Security Council, the Pan-African Parliament, and ECOSOC provide mechanisms for conflict resolution, citizen participation, and civil society engagement. Guided by Agenda 2063, the AU pursues continental, socio-economic transformation through flagship initiatives including the African Continental Free Trade Area, the Single African Air Transport Market, and the Pan-African E-Network, all designed to foster regional integration and development. As Africa advances toward the aspirations of Agenda 2063, the institutional architecture of the African Union remains an evolving project. Conceived as the engine of continental integration, peace and prosperity, the AU embodies grand ambitions. Yet it is headquartered in Addis Ababa, historically. Finfinne, a city layered with unresolved historical grievances. The symbolism is powerful. Africa's premier diplomatic institution stands on land that carries memories of conquest, displacement, and contested belonging. The Oromo question in Ethiopia therefore extends beyond domestic politics. It intersects with core Pan-African principles: self-determination, equality of peoples, and respect for indigenous governance systems. The Oromo people, whose Gadaa system represents one of Africa's most sophisticated indigenous democratic traditions, raise questions that resonate continentally. Can a union committed to the African Renaissance fully succeed if indigenous political systems are marginalized within its host state? Can continental unity flourish where local historical justice remains unsettled? Finfinne illustrates this tension. As the diplomatic capital of Africa, it hosts summits that speak the language of sovereignty, integration, and shared destiny, indeed in colonial languages. Yet for many Oromo, the city also represents a historical rupture, an imperial transformation that displaced communities and restructured land ownership. The constitutional recognition of Oromia's special interest in the capital under Article 49 of Ethiopia's federal framework was intended to address this duality. However, for over 2 decades, the absence of implementing legislation left that recognition largely symbolic. The draft proclamation designed to define and operationalize this special interest, covering cultural recognition, administrative coordination, and equitable resource access, never matured into binding law until now. This unresolved legal gap has fueled political unrest, most visibly the Oromo protests of 2015, 2018, and beyond. The debates continue to reflect deeper anxieties about belonging, representation, and historical accountability. In this sense, the Oromo question is inseparable from the broader African dilemma: whether sovereignty can be meaningful without justice, and whether integration can endure without inclusivity. The story of the AU and Finfinne is therefore not merely institutional, it is philosophical. It asks whether Africa's modern diplomatic architecture can harmonize with its indigenous foundations. Sovereignty without justice risks fragility. Identity without recognition breeds alienation. Architecture without legitimacy remains incomplete. The next chapter is being written by a generation that refuses to choose between heritage and continent, between being Oromo and being African. The challenge is to deepen unity by ensuring that Africa's future is built upon the dignity, rights, and histories of all its peoples. The Gadaa System, an indigenous model for continental democracy. While the African Union often references governance models shaped by Western constitutional traditions, many Oromo scholars point to an indigenous political system that has functioned for more than 5 centuries. The Gadaa System, recognized by UNESCO in 2016 as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, Gadaa represents a sophisticated, cyclical form of democracy rooted in generational accountability rather than wealth, coercion, or hereditary rule. At its core, Gadaa is structured around 5 permanent political groupings: Melba, Mudena, Kilole, Bifole, and Michele, which rotate executive authority every 8 years. This institutionalized rotation ensures peaceful transitions of power and prevents the consolidation of authority in a single individual or lineage. Leadership is not a lifetime entitlement, but a temporary public trust, embedded within a clearly defined generational cycle. Each cohort progresses through a series of grades over approximately 40 years, receiving civic, legal, military, and ethical training before assuming governance responsibilities. Legislative authority resides in the Kafi, the General Assembly traditionally convened under the Oda sycamore tree. Unlike monarchic systems where laws are decreed from above, the Cafe operates through deliberation and consensus. Laws are debated, amended, and proclaimed collectively. Crucially, leaders remain accountable to the ethical code known as Safu, a moral framework that regulates conduct, authority, and community harmony. A leader who violates Safu can be impeached, reinforcing the principle that political legitimacy depends on moral responsibility. Anthropologist Asmarom Legessa described Gadaa as one of the most remarkable indigenous democratic systems in Africa, arguing that it offers a viable model for authentically African constitutionalism. Its rotational structure directly addresses the president for life, phenomenon that has challenged post-colonial governance across the continent. By embedding term limits into cultural law, Gadaa resolves the dilemma of indefinite rule without relying solely on written constitutions. Within this system also exists Sinki, a women-led institution central to Oromo social justice. Women carrying the Sinki stick could intervene in cases of domestic abuse or violent conflict, and their collective action functioned as a moral ceasefire. No man was permitted to defy a woman invoking Sinki authority. This practice reflects a foundational commitment to gender, balance, and communal accountability. In the broader continental context, Gadaa challenges Africa to reconsider whether democratic renewal must be imported or whether enduring indigenous frameworks already provide the architectural blueprint for inclusive governance. General Tadesse Birru, the martial heritage of Oromo. Nationalism and African liberation, the intersection of Oromo identity and the broader African liberation struggle is powerfully embodied in the life of Tadesse Birru, born in 1921. In the Salali zone of Oromo land, Oromia, Birru's early years were shaped by the violence of the Second Italo-Ethiopian War, during which his father was killed by Italian poison gas. The experience forged in him a lifelong commitment to resistance. As a young man, he joined the Arbegnok, the Ethiopian patriot guerrilla movement fighting Italian occupation, and later rose through the ranks of the Imperial Ethiopian Army to become a brigadier general. General Birru is widely regarded as the father of modern Oromo nationalism. Initially a supporter of Ethiopian imperial unity, his political awakening occurred in the 1960s as he confronted the systematic marginalization of Oromo language, culture, identity, and political representation. He emerged as a central figure in the Mecca and Tulama Self-Help Association, transforming it from a development-oriented civic organization into a vehicle for Oromo political consciousness. Under his leadership, the association promoted education, self-reliance, and collective organization, laying the groundwork for a modern Oromo national movement. Birru's legacy extends beyond Ethiopia. In early 1962, Nelson Mandela traveled to Ethiopia seeking military assistance for the African National Congress as it prepared to intensify its struggle against apartheid. Acting under the authority of Emperor Haile Selassie, General Birru, then commander of the elite Ethiopian Special Forces, provided Mandela with military training. Over several weeks, Mandela received instruction in guerrilla tactics, military organization, firearms use, and operational planning at various training sites near Addis Ababa. At the conclusion of the training, Birru presented Mandela with a Bulgarian-made automatic pistol and ammunition. Mandela later buried this weapon at Lily's Leaf Farm in South Africa, where it became a symbol of the ANC's transition to armed resistance. The episode cemented a historical link between Oromo military leadership and the broader African liberation struggle. Tragically, Birru's life ended during the rule of the Derg military regime. Arrested amid political purges, he was executed in 1975, when Mandela visited Ethiopia in 1990. Following his release from prison, he reportedly asked about General Birru, only to learn of his execution. General Tadesse Birru's life reflects a dual legacy, a commitment to Oromo dignity and an enduring contribution to continental freedom movements. Laureate Tsegaye Gebre-Medhin, The Poetics of the African Conscience. If General Tadesse Birru embodied the martial dimension of Oromo, participation in African liberation, Tsegaye Gebre-Medhin articulated its cultural and philosophical voice. Born in 1936 in Boda near Ambo in Oromia, Tsegaye emerged as one of Ethiopia's most influential poets, playwrights, and public intellectuals. Awarded the title of laureate, he used literature as a platform to connect Cushitic Ethiopian identity with a broader Pan-African consciousness rooted in history, dignity, and civilizational pride. Tsegaye's worldview rested on a foundational claim that Africa is the cradle of humanity, drawing on archaeological discoveries in Ethiopia, including the famous hominid Lucy. He argued that human creativity, culture, and intellectual history began on African soil. For him, this was not merely a scientific observation, but a philosophical assertion about historical recognition. He challenged Eurocentric narratives that marginalized African contributions to civilization and criticized colonial, naming practices that erased indigenous heritage, including along the Nile. His advocacy extended to calls for the repatriation of looted African artifacts, notably the Axum obelisk, viewing cultural restitution as inseparable from political sovereignty. Tsegaye's most enduring continental contribution is his authorship of the Anthem of the African Union. Originally written in 1966 as a poem titled Proud to be African, the work was later adopted as the official anthem under the title Let Us All Unite and Celebrate. Together, the lyrics summon the sons and daughters of Africa to rise, collectively in defense of freedom, unity, and shared destiny. They commemorate the victories of liberation struggles, affirm Africa as the cradle of humankind and fountain of culture, and project a vision of lasting peace and justice. The anthem was set to music in 1986 by Kenyan composer Arthur Mudogo Kamoli and adopted by the Organization of African Unity before being retained by the African Union at its founding in 2002. Sung at continental summits in Addis Ababa, the anthem transforms Tsegaye's poetic imagination into institutional ritual. Beyond ceremony, his work represents a deeper intellectual proposition that Africa's future integration must be grounded in historical consciousness. For Tsegaye, Pan-African unity was not simply political coordination, but cultural reclamation. His poetry framed Africa not as a peripheral participant in world history, but as its origin and moral compass, an idea that continues to resonate within continental debates about identity, sovereignty, and global justice. Yadessa Bojia, an artist behind the visual sovereignty and the new dawn for Africa. The modern visual identity of the African Union owes much to Yadessa Bojia, an Oromo artist and graphic designer who fled Ethiopia as a political refugee in 1995 and settled in the United States. Born in Ambo town of Oromia, to a father who co-founded the Mecca and Talama Self-Help Association, Bojia's life and work have been profoundly shaped by the Oromo struggle for justice, cultural recognition, and political empowerment. His creative vision bridges indigenous heritage and continental symbolism, translating aspirations for African unity into compelling visual form. In 2009, Bojia entered an international competition to design a new flag for the African Union. Out of 116 submissions, his design was selected, a moment he learned of while watching television in Seattle. Seeing his artwork displayed behind Muammar Gaddafi on Larry King Live, the AU formally adopted the flag at its 2010 summit in Addis Ababa, cementing Bojia's contribution to the continent's visual diplomacy and symbolic identity. The flag's design is both minimalist and profoundly meaningful. At its center lies a green silhouette of the African continent, representing hope, aspiration, and the landmass itself. Radiating from the map are white sun rays, symbolizing friendship, peace, and the continent's desire for harmonious coexistence with the world. Encircling the map is a ring of 55 golden stars, one for each member state, signifying unity, prosperity, and a shared vision for a bright future. The green background evokes a new dawn for Africa and celebrates the fertility of its soil and the resilience of its peoples. Beyond the AU flag, Bojia's art continues to explore themes of human rights, social justice, and the invisibility of Oromo identity in dominant historical and cultural narratives. Exhibitions such as The Invisibles and Truth Be Told highlight marginalized voices, address the consequences of systemic oppression, and advocate for equity and recognition. For Bojia, art is not merely aesthetic expression, but a tool of responsibility and activism, a means to communicate truth, assert cultural identity, and promote justice across communities in Africa, the diaspora, and beyond. Through his work, Bojia demonstrates how visual culture can carry political and ethical weight, translating the ideals of Pan-Africanism into enduring symbols. The AU flag, now recognized across the continent and the world, is more than a design. It is a declaration of collective sovereignty, unity, and hope, grounded in the lived experiences and contributions of African peoples, including those historically marginalized and often overlooked, like the Oromo, whose Gadaa system reflects centuries of democratic wisdom. His legacy exemplifies the capacity of art to shape institutional identity while affirming cultural dignity and human rights. Ethiopia, the uncolonized beacon and the paradox of Adwa. Ethiopia's status as a non-colonized state underpins its historical role in Pan-African leadership. During the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, European powers divided most of Africa into colonies. Yet Ethiopia retained its sovereignty and gained international recognition under the name Ethiopia, replacing the older designation of Abyssinia. Its independence was further acknowledged through membership in the League of Nations, although formally as Abyssinia, positioning the nation as a symbol of African self-rule in a continent dominated by colonial powers. Ethiopia's standing was solidified on March 1, 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, where a large Ethiopian army under Emperor Menelik II decisively defeated an invading Italian force. This triumph halted European colonial ambitions in the Horn of Africa and established Ethiopia as a beacon of resilience and Pan-African pride, inspiring movements for liberation across Africa and the diaspora. The success at Adwa was made possible by the coordination of diverse forces from across the empire, with Oromo commanders and soldiers playing pivotal roles. Fitaurari Gebeyehu led the vanguard, dying heroically in the charge against Italian positions. Deyazmak Balcha Safo commanded artillery, delivering devastating blows to Italian formations and later serving as governor of Sidamo to defend sovereignty. Ras Makanen, chief strategist and governor of Harar, commanded 12,000 troops, while Fitaurari Hapte Georgis, of mixed Oromo ancestry, served as war minister and key military advisor. Their leadership exemplifies both courage and tactical skill, highlighting the central Oromo contribution to Ethiopia's anti-colonial victory. Yet the legacy of Adwa carries a paradox. While the battle preserved Ethiopia from foreign domination, it did not end internal subjugation. Many Oromo scholars argue that the post-Adwa expansion of the Ethiopian empire entrenched a settler-like dynamic, annexing Oromo lands and imposing systems that marginalized indigenous populations. In this context, Ethiopia's triumph over Europe coexisted with ongoing internal oppression, compelling the Oromo to navigate both resistance against external colonizers and struggles for recognition, autonomy, and self-determination within their homeland. The Battle of Adwa thus embodies both glory and contradiction, a defining anti-colonial victory that celebrated Oromo valor and leadership, yet simultaneously reflected the tensions of empire building and internal marginalization. It serves as a reminder that sovereignty is meaningful only when paired with justice, and that the fight for dignity extends beyond defeating foreign powers to asserting the cultural, political, and territorial rights of indigenous peoples, like the Oromo within a truly equitable federation. Conclusion: bridging identity and unity in the Pan-African project. The relationship between the African Union, its headquarters in Finfinne, and the state of Oromia reflects both remarkable achievement and enduring structural tension. Ethiopia's historical independence created the conditions for the emergence of continental institutions. Yet this sovereignty was built on a multi-ethnic coalition that included the Oromo, whose cultural heritage and governance systems were often marginalized within the imperial framework. Figures such as General Tadesse Birru, Laureate Tsegaye Gebre-Medhin, and artist Yadessa Bojia exemplify the vital connection between Oromo heritage and the Pan-African vision. Birru's mentorship of Nelson Mandela demonstrates how the martial expertise of the Oromo heartland contributed directly to the liberation struggles in southern Africa. Tsegaye's poetry and the African Union Anthem articulated a philosophical African conscience, bridging indigenous identity with Continental ideals. Bojia's design of the AU flag translated this vision into a powerful visual, symbol of unity, reflecting a narrative shaped by exile, struggle, and the hope for democratic renewal. Central to this synthesis is the Gadaa System, the centuries-old Oromo model of participatory democracy. Its principles of generational leadership, consensus-based decision-making, and ethical accountability provide a framework for inclusive governance, offering lessons for the African Union as it pursues its objectives under Agenda 2063. Recognizing and integrating such indigenous systems underscores the importance of grounding continental institutions in Africa's own historical and cultural knowledge, rather than relying solely on external templates. Ultimately, the story of the African Union in Finfinne is the story of a continent striving to reconcile its ancient wisdom with modern, institutional ambitions. It highlights the necessity of honoring indigenous knowledge, cultural heritage, and the contributions of historically marginalized communities while building structures that reflect unity, dignity, and shared aspiration. The future of the AU and of Africa itself depends on this careful balancing of identity and institution, ensuring that the continent's governance is both rooted in its people and capable of addressing the challenges of a rapidly evolving world. This narrative illustrates that Pan-Africanism is not just a political project, but also a cultural and ethical endeavor, one in which the lessons of the Gadaa System and the lived experiences of the Oromo can inform a vision of Africa that is united, just, and sustainable. Wrapping up the story of the African Union in Finfinne is more than politics. It's about heritage, identity, and the enduring contributions of the Oromo people to Pan-Africanism. From the Gadaa System to the AU flag, history shows that Africa's unity is strongest when it honors its own wisdom. What do you think? Can Africa reconcile its ancient traditions with modern institutions? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore African history, culture, and the fight for justice. Thanks for watching.